is the Human and Social Biology Paper 2 for January 2023 that we are going to go through now. The usual instructions start the paper, whereby you have 2 hours to complete the paper, answering all 6 questions. So let's look at question number 1, which asks you to name one greenhouse gas. I think that should be a fairly familiar question, whereby it's carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is the most popular greenhouse gas. List 3 human practices which could contribute to increased levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Combustion, I hope persons are thinking about combustion, the burning of fossil fuels that happens in factories, in industries, that is very popular. The operation of vehicles, machines, they are heavy on gas and diesel in the Caribbean, and burning of forests or forest lands. Remember, trees capture carbon dioxide. They capture carbon. They are carbon sequestration places like the Amazon rainforests or other forests found throughout the world. So burning them will automatically release carbon into the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide. We are on to part B. Figure 1 shows the number of weather climate disasters which occur between 2000 and 2020. Let's make this smaller so you could see the whole graph. Insect infestation, flood, famine, extreme temperatures, drought. The question goes on to ask, identify the weather climate disaster that had the greatest increase between 2000 and 2020. And if you just work it out, you could put in the calculations from each one. For insect infestation, we have 500 for 2000 and it goes up to 1500. So that gives a difference of about 1000. Flooding, it's from 500 to about 1100. It's not as much as insect infestation, but it's high enough, 600. Famine, just over 200 to go up to about 500. So that is just under 300. Extreme temperatures from 900 to 1300. So that is about 400. Drought hasn't really changed. So the one with the largest difference is insect infestation. Identify the weather climate disaster which occurred most frequently in the year 2000. So we're just looking at the gray bars. We're just looking for which one is the highest. It's extreme temperatures. Extreme temperatures is the highest. So the answer, just identify, just state it. You don't need to give any explanation. You don't need to say why you find as the highest. Just state it. It just asks you to identify. So just write it and move on. Suggest 2 ways in which flooding could impact food security. The first one that should come to mind is the loss of crops or the loss of agriculture or the damage of crops, right? So flooding damages plants, the food will be gone, food gets destroyed from flooding. So just bring this to the next line. So as the food is destroyed, demand increases above supply. So food prices will go up. That is impacting food security. Another thing to be concerned about for flooding is that flooding does damage whereby it can off an area, it can isolate a designated area. All right. So if a designated area becomes isolated, it means persons don't have access. These commercial spots, these markets, that will impact food security. All right. Flooding also means that entities, governments may have to redivest some funds into improving or rebuilding, all right, recovering from the disaster that is flooding. All right. So if that you could take funds from the food bill to help persons or the communities with infrastructure. So all these are ways. They just ask for two, but these do qualify to get you the marks. At sea, it has been predicted that as a result of global warming, ocean levels may rise as much as 3 meters. That's a lot. Suggests one social implication and two economic implications of rising ocean levels. And once we think in social implications, you should be thinking about anything affecting the society. And the Caribbean is one such society. These small islands that we have in the Caribbean, most of the territories are in island states. They can be identified as SIDS, small island developing states. They will suffer with less land space. So a reduction in land space means housing becomes affected because persons now have to move from their areas, which could be low-lying, to not just inwards, but upwards, because 3 meters means a lot of increase in with respect to water that will move significantly in. Economic implications, we are talking about money in communities, monies from the government, even money at an individual level. So the government may now have to do social programs for housing, relocation. A rise in sea level will impact things like ecotourism, beaches, and tourism generates much revenue for the Caribbean states, right? So all of that, once you're talking money, this is an economic implication. D, identify two examples of renewable energy. And if we're talking about the Caribbean, everyone should be thinking wind and solar, right? Wind and solar, that will get you the marks. Just write them and move on. You don't need to write a whole sentence to get the mark, but if you do write a whole sentence, nothing is wrong with that. D part 2, explain one way in which the use of renewable energy can help to solve environmental issues in the Caribbean. So how could the renewable energy, like the ones you just identified, how could they help provide environmental relief in the Caribbean? Right? So if we're using solar panels for solar energy, that means the load that is now being generated by fossil fuels is reduced, whereby electricity is concerned. So you could have solar panels to generate electricity. It means the load on the grid is reduced from the fossil fuel extent. Right? So just 2 marks for that. Just explain your one way and move on. That question totals 15 marks. Moving on to question number 2. This, just glancing at the question, you see it focuses on the reproduction. Figure 2 shows a diagram of the male reproductive system with 4 structures labeled A, B, C, and D. Using the letters labeled only, identify the labeled structures in figure 2, which is responsible for the production of sperm. So you are just writing the letter. You don't even need to label the parts, but you are just writing the letter to get the ma. So which part is responsible for the production of sperm? And you know that is B, the testes, or in this case, testis. Testis is singular, testes is plural. Identify the label structure in figure 2, which is most prone to developing cancer. If it is the male reproductive system, we're thinking about prostate cancer, and that is D. Part D, it's the prostate. Part D is the prostate. Identify the label structure in figure 2, which produces a nutrient-rich fluid that is the main component of semen. And there are just two parts remaining. C is pointing to the bladder, so we know it's not that. A will be the default answer, and that is the seminal vesicles. The seminal vesicles is A. Figure 3 shows diagrams of a human sperm and a human ovum. Here is the sperm, the ovum. Explain why the human ovum is much larger than the human sperm. And that's a rather simple answer. The human ovum is the sex cell that is responsible for funding the growth of the zygote. So when the sperm fertilizes or fuses with the ovum, the nutrients required for the growth and the division of cells comes from the ovum. Likewise, that activity requires plenty energy as well. So it's also loaded with mitochondria. Part C, figure 4, is a graph showing the menstrual cycle and the hormones that influence its function. From figure 4, identify the two hormones that are necessary for ovulation to occur. And if we are watching the graph or the diagram, the figure carefully, we see that estrogen goes up before ovulation. Now remember that ovulation is the release of the ovum. It's the release of the ovum, and what else is happening for the release of the ovum? We have luteinizing hormone as well. The luteinizing hormone also increasing ovulation. You see ovulation identified here at 14 days or day 14. So both estrogen and luteinizing hormone, LH, is responsible. From figure 4, identify the hormone that is most important for the thickening of the endometrial lining during the luteal phase. And if we just look at the luteal phase here from day 14 to day 28, we're just looking for the highest hormone, progesterone. So progesterone is your answer. Describe the change in body temperature during ovulation and state its significance for couples who are trying to conceive. The increase in temperature will serve as an indicator of fertility. So it gives the peak time where fertility is occurring. So should an ovum encounter sperm around that time, that will be great. Pregnancy will be likely to occur. All right, the probability of a pregnancy occurring at that time from an ovum encountering a sperm is very good. State the role of the follicle stimulating hormone. This is self-explanatory by means of it's already built into the name. This hormone stimulates the development of follicles. All right, it causes follicles to mature, which then become released at ovulation. All right, so follicle stimulating hormone causes the development of the follicle to maturity. Cancers of the female reproductive system, such as cervical and uterine cancers, are prevalent and can result in death. Discuss how pap smears can reduce the incidence of these types of cancers. First of all, let's identify that cancer is an abnormality. Cancer is where cells are not being controlled, they are not being regulated as they should. All right, this leads to a problem. It leads to too much cell growth, which is a bad thing. All right, so having done a pap smear, doing a pap smear allows identification of such abnormalities, that is cancer cells, at an early stage, which means the earlier, the better. You have more options available to you if you catch the development of cancer in its early stages. And if we explain all of that, for this question, 15 marks. Would complete question 2. Question 3, we see they start off with pollution. So that means they're focusing on section E, humans' impact on the environment, and they ask us to identify the term pollutant. So a pollutant is a substance or material which harms the environment. All right? Anything that harms the environment, they introduce it to the environment to harm it. That's a pollutant. Identify 2 sources of air pollution other than factory exhaust. We have vehicles, all those cars on the roads. They're producing pollution. All right? Oil tankers and rigs. All right? Remember, they produce high stacks for pollution. State 2 effects of air pollution other than acid rain. 2 effects, meaning what happens because of pollution. What happens because of pollution? Respiratory illnesses, considering we are discussing air pollution, something happens in the air. Respiratory illnesses. And if we're talking about the air, greenhouse gases should come to mind. That is part of air pollution, or the carbon dioxide going into the air. So an increase in the greenhouse effect, which also means the place could get warmer. Human products found in the Caribbean and activities that occur in the Caribbean are shown below. Each of these products and activities has its own impact on the water cycle. A, dams. B, urbanization. C, deforestation. D, factory exhaust. Match each human product and activity above with the impact it could have on the water cycle below. Now, you could read this in order and complete it in order, or you could read and see which ones are the easiest and reduce the feel of selection. All right? So decrease the amount of water stored in groundwater and increases runoff. That's urbanization. Decrease transpiration and increase soil runoff and results in soil erosion. See this decrease in transpiration. Transpiration is something done by plants. The only one that identifies plants completely is deforestation. Increased cloud cover leads to increased precipitation and decreased evaporation. Increased cloud cover is because it is becoming polluted. So factory exhaust contributes to the pollution. Increase water surface area resulting in greater evaporation. There is only one left from the selection, which is A. All right, because if you have a dam, the surface area of the water has increased. Remember, a dam spreads out above the land. Figure 5 is a diagram which shows sources of water pollution. List 3 sources of water pollution illustrated in figure 5 that result in eutrophication. So we just have to look at the diagram, look at the figure, and see what is happening. And eutrophication is the growth on top the water, preventing oxygen and everything from going down. Usually it's algae. So once that algae covers the surface of the water, the animals beneath it will be starved of oxygen, they're starved of sunlight, so it kills the living organisms beneath it. So if we see animals next to the waterways, it has an arrow from it. So those animals, those look like what? Sheep. That manure is nutrients in the water, which makes it have an algae bloom. All right, that's a good start for eutrophication. Fertilizer, well, look at our fertilizer in bold written right here. And this looks like an agriculture spot. I'm not too sure what they're growing, but it's right next to the water. So fertilizers, those nutrients going into the water can cause an algae bloom. We see gas station seepage, and look the groundwater. Look how close the groundwater is. I know this is not drawn to scale, but the seepage is right there. The one runoff would contain some sewage, so that could run into the waterways and cause an algae bloom as well. All right. So just 2 ways in which eutrophication can be prevented. And for eutrophication, you could always keep testing these waterways. You can keep testing these waterways in case you identify anything that will prevent. Right? Remember, prevent is to take action before it happens. You could also have land planning, whether it's a committee, whether it's a body, whether it's a company. Land planning is very important. As it stands, they have everything and anything right next to the water source. Someone may want to look at it. And that means 15 marks for this question also. On to question number 4. Define each of the following generic terms. Phenotype, that is the expression of the genotype, the physical expression of the genotype. Example, your eye color, your blood type, all those are examples of phenotype. Homozygous, this is where the genotype has 2 alleles that are the same. All right, 2 alleles that are the same. If we use the terminology, homozygous dominant or homozygous recessive. If the 2 alleles are dominant, they're homozygous dominant. If the 2 alleles are recessive, then it's homozygous recessive. Name the 2 chromosomes which determine sex in humans. The 2 chromosomes which determine sex in humans. That's the sex chromosomes. One is X and one is a Y. So females have an XX, males have XY for their complement of sex chromosomes. Ned and Brian are brothers who share the same parents. Ned has hemophilia, but Brian does not have hemophilia. Using the symbols X superscript capital H to denote normal blood and X superscript common H to denote hemophilia, state the genotypes of Ned and Brian. First of all, both Ned and Brian are male, so they would be XY, and we just need to be concerned about how we write our H's. Now, Ned has hemophilia. Ned has hemophilia, so it means he has the common H or the recessive H. Brian does not have hemophilia, so he would have the capital H on his X. Right? I can't get it superscript, but you understand. Using the Punnett square in figure 6, determine the phenotypes and genotypes of Ned and Brian's mother and father. Now, up here, we already identified that both the recessive and the dominant H were found. So that means because they are getting their X chromosome from their mother must have both of these. Hence, the mother is heterozygous. The mother must be heterozygous. So here, we will put the mother as being heterozygous. Right? The father, however, the father could be whatever. It does not matter because the father contributes the Y chromosome to his children. Father contributes the Y chromosome to his children, so he could be either one. So I will do the first cross with him being dominant, then I will do another one with him being recessive. So this should give you so this is what it would look like if you do this cross. Remember, the mother must be heterozygous. So this will give one son, the son who does not have hemophilia, and this one will give the son who does have hemophilia. So we could complete the question for the phenotype of the mother and say that she is a normal carrier. The father can be normal, or he could have the full disease. He could be hemophilia. Let me just shift this around to show you the next cross. So this one is up here. And if the father were recessive, then the children, particularly the daughters, would be this would be the outcome for the daughters. But nothing would change for the sons, because the sons get their Y chromosome from the father and the X chromosome from the mother. All right? Explain why the incidence of hemophilia is higher in men than in women. And that's just simply based on probability, because males only have one X chromosome. Females have two. So when you work out the combinations, males can get it, have a 50-50% chance of getting the hemophilia, whereas females have a 66 to 33% chance of not having it to having it. They have a 33% chance of having hemophilia, whereas a 66% chance of not having it because their homozygous dominant state and their heterozygous state means they don't have the disease. 15 marks for that question. Question 5. Ethan is a frontline worker at the hospital. He was not immunized against the COVID-19 virus and has contracted it. He recovers 2 weeks later. Several months later, a variant of the COVID-19 virus arises, and Ethan is unsure whether his previous exposure will protect him from contracting the variant. Part A, in the scenario given above, identify the antigen and state why antibiotics cannot be used to eliminate. The antigen is the marker on the surface of the virus. This is the marker that your body will notice to identify it as being something foreign. Antibiotics are used to kill bacteria. COVID-19 is caused by a virus. Part B, another definition, define the term immunity. This is the response generated due to a foreign antigen. The response is in the form of antibodies, right? Antibodies. Describe the process of immunization. So, when your body identifies the antigen, it produces an immune response, releases antibodies, and those antibodies do their job to get rid of the foreign contaminant or the pathogen. After this, should you experience the antigen a second time, your body would have remembered the prior encounter. And because it remembers it, it could respond faster than it did the first time. So it doesn't need to take as long as it did the first time. So hence you are said to be immunized. All right? B, explain to Ethan how his body was able to overcome the invasion of the COVID-19 virus. Although he was not immunized, he would experience a natural immunity. His body would have developed the antibodies naturally. His lymphocytes would work very plenty to produce these antibodies with assistance from the phagocytes, which do the job of consuming and eating the particulate virus matter. So as the virus particles are broken down, identified from the antibodies of the lymphocytes, the phagocytes would get to work to consume the particulate matter. Part E, discuss the type of immunity that Ethan developed as a result of contracting the COVID-19 virus. He would have developed a natural active immunity, meaning he would have gotten the virus naturally, and his body would have done the work to bring about the immunity. So it's a natural active immunity. F, discuss whether Ethan's exposure to COVID-19 virus would provide him protection against the variant. It would provide him some protection, not 100%. Right? So he is somewhat protected, but not totally. Right? Because he has experienced the first variant, and this is a second variant. So look at it as him having a foundation for his immunity in which he will build upon. That would give us 15 marks for this question. Question 6 was the topic of circulation. Figure 7 shows two human hearts, A and B. One heart is in a state of systole and one heart is in a state of diastole. The arrows shown below indicate the flow of blood. Identify the structure labeled X in heart B and state its function. X is the mitral valve, also known as the bicuspid valve, and it prevents the backflow of blood into the atrium. So the ventricle, blood flows forward, and if blood is to flow backwards, the mitral valves will close shut to prevent that. Identify the heart in figure 7 that is in systole and state whether the ventricle is being emptied or filled. Systole is when the heart is contracting, the pressure is increasing to eject blood out of the heart. Blood from the left ventricle goes into the aorta to spread to the rest of the body. So we have it here, the left ventricle, blood will go into the aorta to go out to the rest of the body. So it is at A and it is being emptied. State whether the blood flowing in the left ventricle is oxygenated or deoxygenated. Justify your response. A simple way to know this is that oxygenated blood is on the left-hand side of the heart. Deoxygenated blood is on the right-hand side of the heart. Or you could write it out like this. Blood from the lungs goes to the pulmonary vein, which goes to the left atrium, which goes to the left ventricle. Figure 8 shows a man sitting at a dinner table. Examine figure 8 and list 3 risk factors other than obesity that could contribute to the man developing hypertension. And if we examine this picture clearly, he has cigarettes here, the cigarettes pack with the ashtray. He has some salt. He has what is looking like fries with some meat. He has beers and a nice knife and fork. The fork is in his left hand. The knife is in his right hand. So many of those things would pop out to us. The cigarettes, that could lead to hypertension, narrowing of the arteries. The salt, that's hypertension in itself. The fried foods, high in fat and oil, that is oil that they're trying to depict on the plate. All right, so all of that leads to hypertension, which is high blood pressure. Suggest 2 other non-communicable diseases, NCDs, that a man could develop as a result of the risk factors identified in B1. So it means based on what you identified here, in this case, we identified cigarettes, salt, and fried foods, that non-communicable diseases. We are going with a liver disease, lung cancer. Well, lung cancer is obvious from the cigarettes, fatty kidney disease, and there are other diseases. You could tell us in the comments what other diseases you would have put for this question. These are the ones that we chose. With each subsequent decade in the Caribbean, the incidence of obesity has been increasing in children. Explain 2 strategies that Caribbean governments could utilize to address this trend. This should automatically pop into your mind: education, and you just have to explain it. Education, educating the students, educating their parents, educating the adults in authority, because the adults are the ones who provide the students, the children in schools, with their nutrients. So education, whether it be advertisements, social media, mainstream media, it will do well. And then you could ban substances. You could ban substances from in schools, so students do not have access to it from secondary schools, from primary schools. Specific items you could remove so that students have a limited access to it only through the authority of their parents or their homes will they get access to it. So another 15 marks would have been obtained for this question. This brings us to the end of the January 2023 paper 2 for human and social biology. You can let us know in the comment section what other answers you would have put, for we did not exhaust the entire list, but do like and subscribe and look out for more papers.